But we continue to get analysis in terms of how the first day of the special votes went. And also, as we head up to the 29 May elections, I'm now joined by Professor Susan Booysen. Prof, thank you so much for your time. So, of course, we heard from the IEC, and certain issues were raised in as far as things potentially not going smoothly. One of the biggest concerns, of course, is coming out of the Eastern Cape, Mthatha particularly.
Yes.
I mean, how should we read, the incident that is happening there, especially given the concerns around law enforcement authorities?
Yes, that the Mthatha case is big enough and systemic enough to covering a whole community, and that is therefore really significant because there are potentially, if it continues tomorrow, there are quite a few voters who will probably not be able to go and cast their special votes or be visited to cast those. And heaven forbids it still spills over into Wednesday. That would really demand a massive attention. And we haven't had cases like that of a systemic community-wide protest in the past. Not seriously. Not I think on this scale. I'm very aware in past elections there have been protests here and there. There have always been hot spots. In one case, in a local government election a few years ago, there was even a whole voting station that was burnt down. And sometimes there are protests around those. But there have always been plans made, or people have just been happy that just a few who voted actually did vote. But I don't quite know how the IEC would handle that. I can imagine, though, if a whole community is affected, there could be special plans made in consultation with the parties, I imagine, to extend voting there, because there are a few days of counting in between and quite a few days before the election results will be announced. That means there potentially the door is probably not closed, but the IEC will have to be innovative.
I mean, we know, of course, there are certain incidences outside of the IEC, as they've mentioned with the Mthatha case. That begs the question then, should law enforcement not be stepping up? I mean, we've heard from Nat Joints saying that they are ready for any eventuality, in this particular election. We're not, of course, associating what's happening in the Eastern Cape to an election incident-related matter. But surely they should be stepping up.
I think they really should prove what they have been trained for and what they have been preparing for. Because it's exactly to avoid societal, broader inner community actions that it interfere with the election processes. And there's IEC to deal with the election processes, but the environment security apparatuses, they are there to do this. And I'm sure by now they should know how to deal with a taxi strike or with big trucks blockading roads.
One of the questions that was asked during this briefing was, of course, the matter as it relates to the MK party. We saw, of course, yesterday the IEC responding to allegations of vote rigging, of course, saying that that is not the case, denying those accusations and looking into certain political party members who had entered a warehouse belonging to the IEC, of course, containing material that it relates to elections. I mean, what should then we be reading into these incidents, particularly given that the IEC is yet to respond in terms of how it will act against those political parties that are fund-wanting?
Yes, we're really traversing the edges, the fringes of electoral politics at this point, and also see that in the behavior of the MK party. Now they're in the system, now they're not in the system. Now they accept the rules, now they challenge the rules or try to make their own rules. And I think that is a deliberate game that the MK party is playing. And potentially at this stage, I think we really have to watch out for them at the end of the day not refusing to accept verdicts if it doesn't go their way. We know they've been claiming, spreading propaganda, manufacturing the propaganda that yes, they can win by an outright majority, and others say a 2/3 majority. And we know that is not a realistic forecast by any stretch of the imagination, by many dozens of percentage points. That's not a realistic check. So, but it says if they want to create an atmosphere that their followers must expect that they will do really well, and then leave that door open to themselves when it does not happen. What next? Do they accept it? Do they protest it, etc.?
Just staying with the MK party, it has come to light during this press briefing a few minutes ago that, of course, the MK party is not particularly pleased with the IEC for allowing Jabulani Khumalo access, to this particular facility. What do we make then about, just so close to the elections, we're still seeing, internal squabbles within this party?
And squabbles as to who is the leader of the party, which is quite far-fetched. MK Party has really been an unusual party phenomenon, not playing by any of the rules that we use for establishing political parties operating, arriving at manifesto, doing their candidates. MK Party just replaces, restructures its leadership, and maybe informs IEC of the relevant changes or not. So they're really playing by their own rules. And yes, that is going to be a big question mark going ahead in these elections as to how exactly do they fare, what do they accept at the end of the day, and who is there to take them to Parliament if they actually do go to Parliament. I'm sure they will, but anything is possible in that repertoire.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, and also if you look at just some of the surveys that have been done around the MK party, not too quickly to just dispel their power and their might, particularly as it relates to the much contested KZN.
Yes.
There are
indeed.
There are reports that say that could, be probably the third or the fourth largest party in the country after these elections. So are we seeing electioneering continuing then in that regard? I mean, officially electioneering or campaigning ends tomorrow around, I think, midnight, if I'm not mistaken. But are these antics just part of the process of swaying voters and continuing to woo them ever so subtly?
I think we see really most of the political parties really doing everything to remain in the limelight, to cloud out opposition from the screens. Even our president, last night, primetime TV, that is when he did his thank you to the nation, if it wasn't a eulogy, whatever it was, but that was really pushing out any other coverage of any other party.
In fact, just on that, Prof, I did ask one of our other analysts, how do we read that? I mean, it was, he was wearing his hat as, president of the country, but he did talk and squeeze in a little bit of, the successes of the sixth administration.
Yes, there was little in his speech that could actually be differentiated from the ANC's election campaign, like it's been in the state government advertisements in the weeks before the election came, before this week. One had to do a double or three takes on it to see, is this now ANC election advert? No, it's government. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, and that is how it converges. So the state apparatuses and state information, state actions have really been used in a big way in this campaign by the ANC, to the extent that there really so frequently has just been no differentiation at all between the two.
How concerning is that then for other political parties, particularly opposition parties, who also, one would imagine, given the fact that we're told that the ANC is projected to come now under 45%, some say that political parties, as in opposition parties, should actually be stepping up.
Yes, indeed. It must be so difficult to fight this election battle as an opposition party and see the extent to which it's a story to a large extent of incumbents the world over. They just have so much advantage from incumbency. They had a whole state working for them. It's surprised they achieved as little as they did. But it must be so difficult for opposition parties to actually fight against that because the resources are so diverse.
Just talking about opposition parties, I mean, of course, we have seen how the political landscape has changed. You've had your staunch opposition parties who've been there right next to the ANC for a number of years, being potentially threatened by your up and new coming parties.
Yes.
Let's position then the latest parties that we are seeing in the fray. You know, we've got about more than 30 that are new. We see the likes of the Bossas, the Rise Mzansis, you know, of course, Action SA running into its first national and provincial election per se. But, you know, just taking that into consideration, how does this then further put pressure on the likes of the EFF, the IFP, the DA?
It's been putting immense pressure on those parties. I could have did in some way on ANC, but on this second tier of political parties, because there's so much fragmentation. It's a big phenomenon in South African party politics. It fragments off the existing parties and is not one singularly big new opposition party that rises onto the landscape. So at this stage, it's really the main party declining, say a second tier, few opposition parties, big, but chiseling, at smaller parties chiseling away at its support, and then a range of so many diverse new parties. And we know from experience, just a few of those are actually going to make it in Parliament. Even if we complain that in Parliament there are so many tiny and micro parties that only bring one or two representatives into Parliament, there's going to be dozens of these 52 parties on a national ballot who don't even make it into Parliament.
But those small ones, we've seen the impact that they have made. But Prof, let's leave it there for now. Thank you so much for your analysis. Well,
Thank
of course, plenty then to digest as we head up to that crucial 29 May elections. We are, of course, reporting live from the National Results Operations Centre right here in Midrand.